Rob brought in over $100,000 from his Airbnbs last year, all while working his 9 to 5, raising 2 kids. In this interview, we're going to break down exactly how he runs his 3 Airbnbs and has figured out how to balance work, family, and also build a business on the side. These deep dive interviews used to be part of my paid membership, but now I'm releasing them for free because the strategies inside are just too valuable to keep private. If you don't know who I am, my name is Preston. I build a $15 million real estate portfolio and make $400,000 per year in net profit from my Airbnbs. In this interview, we're going to go over how Rob found a fully furnished property that required barely any upfront setup costs. We're also going to discuss what he says to landlords to get them to agree to Airbnb, how he runs his Airbnbs in other states without ever visiting them, and how a simple tweak to his listings helped him book out his Airbnbs even during the off season. So with that being said, let's dive right into it.
All right, we got Rob here in the house. Thanks for joining here.
Absolutely.
So Rob's been absolutely crushing it since he's joined the program. We wanted to do this deep dive on, his background, and his whole process from, basically from start to finish at a high level of how he's been able to build a successful 6-figure a year Airbnb business. So let's kind of take it back from the beginning, Rob. Now, if you want to just kind of give us a brief background of, your kind of journey, your background, and we'll take from there.
Yeah. So I kind of stumbled upon this whole model, as Preston calls it, the bridge method, back in, I would say like mid 2020 or so. I was in the process of finishing up my MBA and looking at kind of take some of the learnings that I had, deploy them elsewhere. I'd already started one business, plus my, normal 9 to 5, and kept seeing some videos from Preston on Instagram and was like, you know what, this sounds like a relatively low risk entry point into real estate. Let's do some digging and see kind of what we can find here. So, after doing the research, I decided to join the course. I think I joined in August, and then by October, I had my first property lease under contract, and then that went live in January. And then I think in November was at 22, we had the next one ready to go, and now I'm at 3 total. So it's been a wild ride. There's been a lot of learnings, but it's like anything that you jump into. You can sit on the sidelines and try to speculate of how's this going to go. What do I need to be prepared for in order to do this? It's like just take that first step, and we kind of bumped our heads along the way, but we figured it out, and went from 0 to over 100 grand in revenue year 1. So that's pretty cool.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that when it starts a business, even though you have the roadmap laid out for you, there's always going to be ups and downs, right? In any business. So it's cool that you've been able to kind of navigate through that for the past year or so. But let's kind of talk about the market research aspect of this. So I know a lot of people kind of figure, one of the biggest questions I get asked is, how do I find this market? How do I find this market? So what was your approach and your kind of experience for picking the markets that you're in right now?
Yep. So, the course that you provided lays out a great thing. It's like, where do you want to go on vacation? What makes sense to you? And I've traveled a lot, both for work and for personal. And there are plenty of places that I looked at. I got family in Florida, so that was where I started. But where you start isn't always where you end up. So I had researched several markets in Florida, found plenty of properties, got plenty of yeses and agreements from landlords. I ended up pulling back to my own home base of Louisville, Kentucky, and started looking around to see what was here. Happened to luck out on the first property I got into because the owners had already run it as an Airbnb. Unfortunately, they went live in February of 2020, which is not the best time to do that. Travel grinded to a halt, and then they pivoted to long-term rentals. But the benefit was that they had fully furnished the place and set it up to operationally run as an Airbnb. So when I pitched them the idea, they're like, oh, we totally get that. That model makes total sense. We've already set it up. We've already gone through the permit process for you. So you don't have to worry about any of that. So the first one was kind of like a very easy, no barrier to entry type of deal. And it's been a great working relationship that I've had with them. They've actually got a couple properties that they're thinking about just selling to me outright since I've done such a good job with this one for them. So, as far as finding the market, you want to find somewhere that, obviously has high tourism rates. Every major tourism destination is going to publish this, and usually in a PDF. You can go look through it, find the numbers. There are places, I have, a couple markets that I'm in. One is Louisville, Kentucky. The other is St. Simons Island, Georgia. Louisville is great because the city does a wonderful job with programming things year round to pull people in. People think Louisville is just the Derby. We have some of the biggest rock concerts in the country. There are a handful of other events that happen really throughout the year. So it's not just one month is pulling all, the revenue in. Whereas St. Simons, that really has a seasonality to it. That's like, okay, you start in April and you kind of wrap up in September. So you got to make what you can there. So you can kind of spread it out however you want. But for my thing, I like markets that kind of have something going on, throughout the year. You're going to have ebbs and flows, but, if you can find something that's relatively consistent, you don't have to worry about, well, if I didn't kill it in this month, is my season pretty much over? No, you'll keep going. So yeah, a lot of ways to look at it. Just look at revenue. That's the biggest thing. Revenue and occupancy rates typically are the 2 driving factors there.
Yeah, love that. And you're thinking about this very strategically, right? Because some with the St. Simons, there might be like your hot months from April to September. We also want another market that you're in to diversify yourself to.
You got to hedge your risk a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I love that approach. So kind of tying that into the, you touched a little bit on your cold calling, talking to the landlord. Now, this is one of the aspects where I think you're the strongest, where you could literally call 5 landlords and you can get at least 1 or 2 to say, or at least be interested and say yes. So let's discuss your kind of process for talking to these landlords and building that trust, so that way you can, eventually close these deals with them.
Absolutely. I have a little bit of I have a full-on sales background. One of the things with this model, and you really got to look at it from this perspective, is the obvious question is, as a landlord, why would I let somebody use my property as an Airbnb? And if you only look at it through that lens as a negative aspect, you're not going to ever come out ahead in this. You have to go into it with how do I create a win-win, as any sales approach would entail? How do I create a win-win for me and the landlord? And if you think the negative is that, we're going to use their house as an Airbnb, think of all the positives that you're ultimately going to be able to deliver to them. One is they're going to have somebody staying in there, year-round, 365, that is doing whatever in their place, and the only time they really have insight is at tenant turnover. And Preston is, someone that has several properties. You can probably attest to the fact that, okay, God, every time we switch this over, how much do we have to pay to get it back up in shape and get it running again? With what we do, we have someone in there after every turn to clean it and make sure everything's good. There's no issue. So in effect, the landlord is getting free property management, which typically they'd have to carve off a percentage of their gross to a real estate agent to handle that for them. With us, we offer it for free. And in fact, we're actually paying them to do what we're doing there. They get their rent, they get their place taken care of. It's an absolute win-win, and they don't have someone in there wrecking it. So that's one. Two is, if you just establish trust through that model, it's every objection I've run into, which is typically just like, oh, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? There is a way to mitigate every single thing. I think back to the first call I had with somebody where they actually just chewed me up and spat me out for a house in Fort Lauderdale. He was like, oh, we can have people jumping off the roof into the pool, or doing this or doing that, throwing parties. And it's like, the reality is, it's like, you set up ring cameras, man, or you do the screening up front and be like, hey, what brings you to the area? How have you ever been here before? How many in your group? I see the reservation says this. Is that accurate? Just want to make sure. And do you have any questions for me? You establish some rapport with the guest, mitigate those issues, so you don't have to worry about it. The landlord doesn't have to worry about it. No one has to worry about it. So a lot of the times the objections these people throw up really aren't that big of a deal. They just don't have an answer for it. And that's where you can come in and provide and build that trust of, hey, I know what I'm doing and I can help you navigate this stuff, so you don't have to do it and you're getting paid, and I'm effectively making your property into a completely passive income situation for you, and I'm doing all the work. So that's how I go into every single call and think about it that way.
Yeah, because you're always thinking about what, because people, they don't really care about what you want, right? They want what's in it for them.
Yep.
So as long as you frame it that way and you let them know, this is what we can do. The free property management is genius. The cleaner is coming, 2 to 3 times per week just to check up on the property. They're never going to get that. They might be lucky to do a once a year inspection of how their property is being treated with the long-term tenant. So if you frame it that way, this literally can be the best offer that they can get, because the property's going to be better taken care of. They're going to, have the people come in and inspect the property, and then obviously you're also incentivized to keep the property as nice as possible as well.
Exactly.
Because you're going to get bad reviews if you're not. So there is a win-win-win scenario here, and it doesn't always have to be I'm going to trick this old 70-year-old landlord into taking their property, right? It can't be. There can be a win-win. So now that we've established rapport with the landlord, so what was your process in closing the deals, finalizing the agreement? Did you walk the property before? Let's talk about some of those considerations. I know for your Kentucky property, you probably went in person, but for your St. Simons, how did you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, so the St. Simons one, first of all, I find the properties through Zillow, right? If somebody has it up for rent, I'll go through that. And usually what I will look for is places, with the exception of the condo that I have here in Kentucky, everything else is mom and pop, which is great because, with the one that I went through to get, via a realtor in order to lock down, there were some pros to it because she helped push and actually advocate for the fact that, hey, we should have STRs in this condo. But on the other hand, it was like, you got to go through the corporate structure of a real estate firm where it's like, you got to have this for your deposit. That's a requirement, this, and that. And it's like, okay, versus a mom and pop where you're like, hey, do you mind if I just give you half the security deposit and invest the rest to kind of get your place up to where I need it to be? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, if we're reaping the benefit, then we'd rather have that than, the extra cash, because you're not going to screw the place up. So the St. Simons place, I found that on Zillow, reached out to the landlord. It was November of 22. Reached out to the landlord, talked to them about it. Turns out the husband had accepted a job in Michigan. They were moving away for 3 years. They were like, look, we don't really care what you do with it. So, have at it. The pictures look great. So we went through the process of, okay, let's sign the lease. And usually what I'll do is once we have at least a couple discussions on the phone, I'll set up a Google Meet call where we can see each other face to face. So I am a real person and not some like random scam artist, and go through the process of talking about the lease and the terms and those kinds of things. Who handles what? If something breaks with all of them, it's, look, if anything's related to the functionality of the house, like your HVAC unit, plumbing, that kind of stuff, something goes wrong, that's on you. I'll coordinate the repairs because obviously it's better for me to handle that so I can make sure there's no guest in there. If something happens as a result of one of my people being in there, yeah, I'm going to take that on. Like that's on me. We get everybody to agree to that. We get a lease set up through DocuSign. You get to sign it off, and I always attach the sublease addendum that basically goes on top of that to say, okay, look, here's your standard lease. Here's what we've talked about. You extend to a typical tenant. Here's this stuff which outlines the parameters of this relationship. So that's all included there. It's all signed. We've all agreed to it, and that's that. And that's where you can put in any extra provisions that need to be addressed. Once I got the house in St. Simons, I started vetting cleaners, and through my cleaners, once I got referrals, references. I went through the references, and from those references, I was able to build my team. I'm like, look, if you're already operating down there and you're doing well, who's your handyman? Who's anybody else I need to know? And from the referrals I got, that's how I built my team. And then I got my people in there to basically check the place out. Let me know if anything needed to be addressed. Fortunately, like with St. Simons, the difference between the house I have in Louisville versus that one is the house in Louisville was turnkey. They had run it as an Airbnb. It was already set up to that standard. With the St. Simons house, I had to get it there, which meant paint, it meant landscaping, it meant a bunch of other things, Preston, I'm sure you've gone through with some of your Arizona stuff. But at the end, it's like, okay, well, look, I was able to get the easy path on a couple of these. If I got to do a little bit of work on this one, that's to be expected. So yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are intimidated by doing this remote. I think, obviously there's a comfort level if it's kind of near you or, it's like a quick drive away. But like one of the things I preach is, and every single property we've set up has been remote. It can be done. You just have to find that trusted team. And obviously you found that through the cleaners. They're going to be the most important team members. Yep. And then you can kind of branch out from them, get referrals because they usually know, the saying, rock stars know rock stars, right? So once you kind of find that one person, all you have to do is find that one person and they can kind of refer you to these other people, which is, awesome. That's kind of, the same process that we use for our teams and boots on the ground teams as well in our markets. So that kind of leads us into the design and the furniture aspect. So I'm going to take a wild guess that you're probably not that savvy with design and interior design. I know I'm not. So how did you go about, figuring that aspect out? Because that is such a key component now.
Yep. With the Highlands house, as I call it, here in the Louisville Highlands neighborhood, fortunately, they had done just such an incredible job with that there really wasn't much else I needed to do other than just sort of, okay, from an occupancy standpoint, what needs to happen here? And that had very minimal investment. That was, okay, let's take this twin and trundle bed out of one room, move it into another, throw a queen bed in there so we can sleep more people. And then, what about for outside? Because it's got a nice backyard with like a little pond and water feature thing. What can we put out there? And that was like things that look good in photos, but also increase functionality. So that was throw a fire pit, that kind of stuff. Stuff that's going to give people something to do and, try to make it more experiential than just, hey, we're staying in a house. How is it? You got to look at it from the lens of how is this better than a hotel? So try to make it that and then assess, okay, is there any kitchen stuff? When I started this, I was talking to a buddy who runs a few in my city too. And he said, cook a meal. Like he's like, go to your place, if it's local, cook a meal in it. And you'll learn very quickly what you need and what you don't have. And then go get those things. So that was the Highlands house. Again, very easy. I maybe had to buy a couple TVs, Roku sticks. I'm a big fan of because they have a guest mode. So pro tip. But then the St. Simons one was entirely remote. And so what I did for that was I went through Wayfair. If you can sign up for a pro account, which once you get an EIN for your LLC, they will give you access to that. And you'll get an appointed salesperson who will, once you get your cart together and say, this is what I want to order, call them, they'll give you a discount. And I got all that stuff shipped out. It's all flat packed, so it just arrived at the house in boxes, and I had my handyman in St. Simons assemble every single item and move it all in, and I literally drew up, the floor plans on a note card and sent him, phone shots of it and was like, this is what this room should look like. And then he sent me pictures when they were done. And I was like, that's exactly what I had envisioned. Great. So, there's plenty of inspiration boards out there through Pinterest and that kind of stuff. You just run through the checklist of, okay, what does each room need? We need a bed. We need a mattress. We need nightstands. We need, the basic kind of stuff. And once you have that covered, then it goes into, all right, what do I need to do to make this actually like an interesting spot? And, what can we do to make it nice? So I relied on my handyman to assemble everything, move it all in, set it up exactly as I wanted. And then once all that was done, my wife and I actually flew down in February of 22 or 23 to do the walkthrough and actually stay there for a couple of days. A, to finish up anything that needed to be done, but B, like get a feel for the place. It's hard to write a guest book or a house manual if you have no idea how the house actually operates. So we stayed there. That was important to us, and then, address anything that needed to be dealt with. And then that was that. So, is it impossible remotely? No, but it's one of those things that once you do it, it's like, this is not a problem. I can do this anywhere. It might be a little jarring, but like, you've got FedEx tracking, you know where stuff is, so you can find it. Set up the Ring cameras too, so obviously you can make sure that things are coming in accordingly, but it's not hard.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously there's going to be like logistics things that you have to worry about that you might not have to if you're not doing this remote, but it is all possible, and that all it comes down to those key team members and the boots on the ground team. So once you really thoroughly vet those people and get them on board with your vision, and you have checks and balances where you can go in and have another group of people go and check their work, it can go pretty smoothly, and people are a little intimidated by that, which I completely get, but it's definitely possible because we've done it with 7 properties at this point. Okay, so I think what would be helpful is, we're talking about your properties. Let's actually see the visuals. So do you want to share your screen with maybe, one of your properties, and we can kind of talk about, how you optimize the listing, kind of break it down a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get these pulled up here. So this is the first one. This is the Highlands house. Pretty straightforward. This one, most of this was kind of set up. What you're seeing is kind of how I got it. The living room is pretty much set up as it is. I think I swapped the TV out, but all the furniture is what they had in it. I did the staging here, some champagne glasses in the kitchen. You got to show off the amenities, coffee maker and that kind of stuff. Tons of light. Natural light's important. I even swapped out, just little details, but there's a chandelier up here that's really the only light source in the kitchen other than the window. Made sure that there were very high wattage bulbs in it and put it on a dimmer, just so, it's easier to cook in a kitchen when you can actually see what you're doing and don't, chop your fingers off. This room I actually designed. I'm kind of proud of this. I designed this one from scratch. Ordered this Louisville Skyline watercolor print off of Etsy. The bed frame, and everything came from Wayfair. I think the mattress I got from Amazon. And then just went to like Home Goods, TJ Maxx, and just got some pillows that, match the colors of the paintings. So it has this like kind of rustic but modern sort of feel to it. And like, that was fairly simple to set up. So, it's the rest of the room, bathroom here. Yeah. So this was the first one. And like I said, most of it was already pretty much done, but, I did the rest of it. I got some cornhole boards, axe throwing set, Costco, and then, made the outdoor porch look nice. Obviously we're in Kentucky. So, that's actually sweet tea. It's another little pro tip is put tea, not bourbon. And then the fire pit at night, so people have stuff to hang out and do. But again, most of this was done, but the things that were extra needed, I got that off Wayfair, Amazon, combination of both. And this one last year for 23, this was our best performing property by far. It wasn't just Derby, it's the fact that Louisville does a really good job, as do plenty of other markets out there. It's not just mine, because right now Louisville is almost impossible to get into if you're thinking about, taking a look at this, because it's so regulated, and they just increased those back in September. There are other markets out there where obviously they have things that are year round. My suggestion would be look at anything that, again, I said we have a lot of concerts in Louisville. Look at any of the markets where Louder Than Life, any of the Danny Wimmer presents stuff is going to, because typically if those guys are going there, they have both an infrastructure as well as, enough of a population and draw that's bringing people in year round. So that's this one.
Awesome pro tip. So going back to, I know you found this property turnkey, but the biggest thing that people forget, right, is, okay, so they found this great property, and you see this all over Zillow. You see multi-million-dollar houses with the absolute worst photos that don't highlight anything that the property has, even if it's, the most beautiful place in person. So I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, sweet, I found this great deal, but now, they're going to go take pictures with their iPhone. So what was your process in finding a good photographer to, capture these moments? Because like we were talking about, it could be the best property in the world, but if you're not getting the right photos, then it really doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely. So actually, when I went live on this one, I just kind of snagged the stuff they had down from Zillow just to get it posted, right? Which you can do if you're just like, look, let's just get it up and get some bookings, because you will get some boosts in the algorithm, from Airbnb just because it's new. But immediately, you need to have photos as quickly as possible. And what I did was I just Googled Airbnb photographer, Louisville, Kentucky. And I happened to, literally my photographer lived two doors down from this house. So I just met her over there and said, here's my shot list. Here's what I need. And she had experience with, doing a handful of other properties in the area. So it wasn't anything new to her. I just called out the things that I were like, look, I need this, and I'm going to stage a couple things here, like whether it was the porch, with the bourbon stuff, these champagne flutes in the kitchen. I even had her, show off the table so we can see how many place settings we can actually fit there. It's things like that. A real estate listing is going to be one thing. It's going to show off the house. What an Airbnb photographer, a good Airbnb photographer is going to do is they're going to show off the amenities, so that as a guest or a traveler, you can imagine yourself in this space, so you want them to be more akin to like almost like hotel photographs, show off what am I actually going to be staying in versus like, oh, it's got so much space. Okay, well, yeah, but what do you do in that space? So anyway, I set this thing up here and made sure she got that shot. And then I actually had her come back at night. Again, she lives so close by. I was like, look, I want to make sure the fire table's on and show the string lights off on the porch so that people know that they can sit out there at night and it's illuminated. So yeah, so that was, again, like you can run with the basic stuff, but make sure you get a good photographer, because as Preston and I can both attest, that is the make or break for a place. People are just, they're going by the pictures, and if your pictures suck, they're not going to book it.
Cool, man. So let's talk about the actual management side of the business, right? So, the numbers, all the juicy stuff that people, want to be nosy about. So I'm assuming you use Guesty for hosts, is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it.
So yeah, let's talk about your experience with that, kind of if you want to explain high level what it does, and then also, we'll kind of get into like the numbers here in a little bit.
So Guesty is your Airbnb management platform, and these are financials from last year, as you can see, but I'll kind of give you a high level overview of this. There's a handful of other ones out there. There's Wheelhouse. There's at least 2 or 3 more, but this is the one that I use. I was Preston used it. I got into it too. I'm a big fan of this thing. And basically what it does is it pulls in all your listings into one centralized place where you can manage them from this. It also handles, any booking conflicts and things like that. So if you get booked in one place, it automatically blocks out. You basically have a master calendar over here. And what it does is it blocks off any dates. Like let's say, as a channel manager, if I have something taken on Vrbo, it'll block it off in Airbnb and vice versa. So I don't have to worry about somebody booking it in Vrbo and then somebody booking it on booking.com. And then it's like, oh, well, sorry guys, like somebody already took it. This handles all that for me. So I don't have to worry about this. And then the cool thing is, it tracks revenue, which is a big thing. And so if I do my income reports here, I can set up my own, individualized. I also have a few here, one for each property, and then I have a combined, just so I can kind of see, okay, how are we doing for this year? So here's this month, but I look at, what's 23 look like? As you can see, we are March of 24 and we're already at 92,000 in revenue, which is pretty crazy. And that's why we're on track to beat well over this. So if this is my net payout from this past year. And again, this doesn't factor in things like rent and expenses and that kind of stuff. But if we're just saying top line revenue, which is really this gross amount, that's what we did. This tracks all of it, which is great. It does a breakdown by reservations. I'm not gonna go into that because that's way too long, but this gives me an idea of, okay, what did each property do, and, here are my cleaning fees. Can I factor that in? Any platform service fees and so on. Statistics as well. What's my occupancy rate? Because that's always a question, right? Like, how full did we stay that year? This tells me that down here too. So yeah, could not possibly run this business without it. And the other thing I like too is the smart locks and how it syncs with that. So like as soon as somebody makes a reservation, this generates a code, and then the day they check in, it turns it on live. So I'm not somewhere tied up where someone's knocking on the door and they can't get in the house. The code's already set. All they got to do is check in. And it also, and the other big thing too is obviously the messaging automation. You don't have time to sit there and send a million messages to guests. Preston provided some great templates, which I used and modified a handful of them. And so when someone books, they get a message. When the day before someone checks in, they get a message. The day before someone checks out, they get a message. So they know what to expect. And it's also, you're not having to sit there and type it all up. So it makes this business much more scalable, much more automated, and much easier.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised at how many people will do this stuff manually and be like, oh, I
don't know how.
Yeah, and like, oh, did I send that guest? Even if you have only one property, did I send that guest the code? Or what happens with this? So you can automate a lot of this business. And so a lot of people don't believe me when I say, I'm spending less than an hour per week to kind of manage and oversee everything. Obviously now I have virtual assistants that take care of most of that, so I'm taking less. So how long do you think it takes for you to actually manage the day-to-day of the business, with all the automations and whatnot set up?
I think in the first few months, I was almost obsessive over it, just because I'm like, hey, I got to make sure everything is right here, because those reviews really do matter. I mean, that's what as hosts we're trying to protect, is you got it, 5-star reviews, and those kinds of things. But, this year, now that I've got like a year under my belt with this, it's like, I don't really think too much. I don't really worry about it that much. I trust my people. I trust my cleaners. The one I have here, they're now running both properties, my condo as well as the Highlands house. And, if something's up, they'll let me know and I'll deal with it. And, if something does happen and goes wrong, that's not something you can manage necessarily guesty, but that's just managing your guests and their expectations of hey, look, I had a garbage disposal clog a couple weeks ago, and I reached out to him. I was like, look, I'd be happy to buy you guys around at, as we're doing any of the distillery tours, so sorry about that. They're like, oh, we don't care. They're like, it's not a big deal. We just want to let you know. So A, you don't think it's us, but B, it's so you can get it fixed at some point. And I was even in there while they were out trying to get it fixed, and I couldn't do it. So I sent a plumber over after they checked out. But, it's that kind of stuff, but this handles the rest of it. That's more more of that's the dynamic stuff that comes up, which you need to focus on, so you can protect those reviews. You want a channel manager to handle every other possible thing so that when you do have to, allocate your time and resources to dealing with stuff, because things will come up, that the rest of it's covered. You don't have to worry about it. And that's why, I cannot stress the importance of having something like Guesty.
So, we saw the future projections for this year already. We're in March right now, which is, you're pacing pretty well. So what are kind of the objectives for the end of this year in terms of, if you want to get additional properties, what your revenue goals are, time commitment, all that stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like everybody's goal is, make less or make more, spend less time on things, so, and I'm pretty content with the 3 that we have. I'm interested to see kind of how the St. Simon's one does. Last year there was a ton of upfront and getting it just built out. I mean, that's the nature of this thing, right? If you're going to get into something, you're going to have to invest in it, and I think coming from the Highlands house where everything was pretty much done for me, it's like, all right, we'll put a couple grand into this and get it up and running. The, St. Simon's one was a very different story because we had to furnish it from top to bottom. And, think about furnishing a 4,000 square foot house. It also has a pool, massive backyard. There's a ton of landscaping that goes into it. So yeah, so this year is going to be, we came into an expectation in year 1 of look, instead of just realizing any sort of possible gain from this, let's just keep reinvesting and scale, because that's really in my mind how you make money in this business is you have to scale and you have to do it smart. And so we went from 1 to 3 within 1 year. I don't know if I necessarily recommend that because it's a little crazy. The third one I kind of got into, which I'll show you over here, because it was too stupid of a deal not to. This is a condo in downtown Louisville that is literally I can throw a rock and hit the Yum Center, which is our major arena that brings in concerts. It's where the University of Louisville's basketball team plays. It is a block from it. And I absolutely use this one. If I'm going to basketball games, I'll go to the condo first and hang out there. It's like my own private suite. But this one was just another one of those deals where it was everything that's in here was in here when I got it. And the owners were just like, look, we're not coming back anytime soon. So you do with it what you want. And all I had to do is maybe buy a new TV for this room and get some Roku sticks and some kitchen amenities. So it's one of those things I wasn't necessarily looking to scale beyond 2. And then I saw this and I was like, well, why not? And sometimes you just got to do it.
So I think that's the thing. People are going to be like, oh, he just got lucky on his 2 deals, but you created that luck for yourself by actually putting yourself out there and constantly looking for deals and then actually putting in the work, right? Because people, they'll sit there and analyze hundreds of properties, but they won't make a single phone call.
Pick up the phone. Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen if you're not actually putting in that work? So if you want to kind of talk about how you were able to create that luck for yourself and kind of what your thought process, because it sounds like you're maybe passively looking for something, but how were you able to find this particular one?
I had the realization of okay, look, this first year is going a little slow. And again, that was deliberate. That was we're going to reinvest everything and scale. And I knew year 1, this is not necessarily a get rich quick thing. It is, it's real estate. It's going to take a minute, so I had to, click for me. I'm like, okay, we need to get at least 1 more. And if we can get 1 more at a relatively low barrier to entry, cost wise, and something that's pretty easy to manage, I learned with the St. Simon's one, it's amenities are great, but they also come with an expense, right? So having a pool is great. Fortunately the landlords pay for that, but I handle the hot tub. And when things go wrong, one time we had the pool heater go out, there's a lot of mental headache that comes along with I got to coordinate someone to come out here and fix it and do this and do that. And even if the owners are covering it, I still have to explain to the guests, hey, the heater's not working. Sorry, what's that going to do to me? So I found this one. I was like, location. It is this over here is the Yum Center, right? The big, basketball arena. And, when I saw this one and I saw that it was fully furnished and I saw that the owners were covering the utilities and I saw that everything was pretty much baked into it, I reached out to the real estate agent on it, talked to her, and she was like, hey, she's like, I get it. I'm not opposed to the idea. However, the COA, Condo Owner Association, is not in favor of short-term rentals. And I was like, well, what's the alternative? I watched it. It literally sat on the market. I watched the price come down too, because you can save stuff on Zillow and just watch it start to tick down. They listed at 4,000 and it slowly kept chipping away at that price. So when I called her, it'd been sitting for a while. And that's another pro move is watch it, save it, watch it. If it starts to tick down, make the call, because they're starting to get desperate. And so I reached out to her. She said, maybe, I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk to the board. Even the owner actually of this condo is on the board. So there was that. And after I talked to her, I called back a week later, which I thought was going to be a no. And she actually said, you know what? I talked to the owner. COA completely changed their mind. They're all on board now. And they're like, hey, you know what? Screw it. This makes sense. Let's give it a shot. And I signed a 2-year lease with them off that. And yeah, you're rolling the dice on it. It's like, okay, is this going to work out? Do the numbers make sense? That's why you underwrite. You look at the comps in the area. Come to find out that as soon as I got this one approved, 2 or 3 others on the same floor all flipped to STR. But the thing is, the owners renovated this place so well Like all of this stuff in here is new. I mean, just look at the kitchen's great. This is like this would be like a really nice suite in a hotel, basically. And they, did a really great job with it. So once I got a hold of it, it was like, cool, since I don't really have to put anything in here, I can spend the extra dollars on how do we make this better? So it's, again, was I looking for something like this? Not really, but you got to keep your eyes open because opportunity comes when you least expect it. And this was something I was like, if I can get this would be a game changer. And thus far it has, having been listed for only a few months, it's more than covered any expense that I would have put into it. So yeah, it's worked out well.
And you're creating your own luck. And also a lot of like the practice that you call the people only see the success, but they don't see all the hours that you put into calling other landlords, the other no's that you're getting, and practicing your pitch to be able to, once you find, these gold nuggets, that your, pitch is optimized, how to speak to these people, what they want, and then your consistent follow-up is what led you to get these deals. And so I think a lot of people fail to see that. And so even if you're not ready, you don't have your LLC set up, like I always tell people, like just make the calls. Even if they say no, it's going to get you that thick skin, number one. And number two, it's going to help you, speak to these owners to eventually close the deals that you actually want to, move forward with. So I think those are, really key components. And I think you have done almost better than anyone that I know to get to that point by, continuously practicing, putting yourself out there and creating your own luck. So awesome job on that, man.
That's the thing. Anybody can do this, guys. So keep that in mind. Like I'm not that special. Like, it's if I can do this, you can do this. Like all you got to do is just be willing to do it, So it's not as hard as you think. It's all in here.
So to kind of wrap this up, how does your family think about the new whole business, all the success about it? I'm sure you have friends and family hitting you up about it as well. So what's kind of the overall been on that side?
I think initially people were like, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand it. You're renting people's places and then you're putting them on Airbnb. I'm like, no, that's pretty much it. Like, it's not that complicated, but it's such an interesting model for people. The concept at its core is arbitrage. You're taking something in one market, you're putting it somewhere else, and you're capturing that spread. That's exactly what we're doing here. So it's really not that complicated. But I get the questions of like, well, why wouldn't you just buy it or whatever? I'm like, because the amount of money that's required, like the amount of cash I would have needed on hand to get these 3 properties that I have versus just doing this route, it's a no-brainer. And the risk is also less, in my opinion. Like, sure, there's some trade-offs here. You don't get necessarily the same tax benefits. You're not getting the appreciation on equity. But if something went wrong and I needed to get out of this, I could. It's not the end of the world. What am I, whatever, a security deposit if I break a lease, versus having to actually sell the property and go through with that. There are some trade-offs. So I think the longer I've stuck with this and have kind of gone through like the nights of like, oh, this is what's happening. People have looked at it like, okay, yeah, you're doing this. Like this is a thing. And I've had people I know reach out to me about getting into it. I've even had this, funny enough, like the real estate agent that got me into this one sends me texts probably once a month of like, hey, how are you handling this? Like, has this ever come up? Is this something that you deal with? Because I just don't. And she asked me the other day about like, how do I market these places? Do I use Facebook ads? And I'm like, I don't, but I can give you some tips, happy to. And it's like my thing. It's like, I'm happy to help anybody that's doing this. I've had a couple people actually get into this business and lean on me as a resource. And the reality is it makes me happy because I'm like, okay, somebody thinks I'm doing something right. Like but it's, and again, I'm happy to help anybody that gets up and gets started with this because it's a risk. Absolutely. It can be a little scary, but once you get going, you look back on it like anything and say like, yeah, I made this out to be 10 times worse in my head than it actually is. And it's fun. Some of these properties, if you get them in the right spot, you can actually use them for your own personal use. Like I use this condo when I go to basketball games, concerts. I use the St. Simon's property for Christmas because my family lives in Florida. I'm like, just meet in Georgia. There's a ton of benefits to it. And at the end of the day, like you're going to learn something new if you decide to go through with this. And for me, like that was the big thing. It's like, let's just learn something. Let's learn how to create a business. How big can we make this? And the fact that we did over $100,000 in revenue year one was like, I built a 6-figure business from scratch. Like, if I can do it, so can you. So good luck to everybody that's even thinking about this.
Appreciate the breakdown, the insights. You're crushing it, man. And yeah, again, thanks always for your transparency. This is super helpful. I'm sure it's helped a ton of people out there as well. Talk to you soon. Appreciate it again, the time.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay. See you, man. Hey, so if you're just tired of watching others succeed with Airbnb and you're serious about building your own business, me and my team can help you make that happen. If you're interested, you can shoot me a DM or you can click the link below to apply and we'll set up a time to chat about how we can work together to build your Airbnb business and scale it to $10,000 per month and beyond. Link should be right below this video, or again, you can shoot me a DM. Talk to you soon.